Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm David Yakir.
And I'm Stephanie Raffelock.
And you're listening to Yak About Today. So this is a place to hear a conversation, get insights, and perspectives from us baby boomers. So if the years 46 to 64 mean something to you, then this is the place you want to be. So put your headphones on, go for a walk, and listen to what we yak about today. Hey, Steph.
Hey, David.
So, I know you're having a hard time hearing me. I thought I'd say that up front. Anyway, how was your week?
Week was pretty good. Lots of stuff going on in the world.
Yeah. I don't think I'm dealing with it on my side. Maybe you're dealing with it on your side. I keep having to avoid it. I don't know if you're having the same reaction I am. I'm really stressing out over our current situation.
I think that everybody's stressed. I think we're stressed from kind of being, locked down. You can't really get out. Even in areas where you can get out, everybody's wearing a mask. I don't mind wearing the mask, but it takes away part of the connection that we have from the face-to-face. I miss that face-to-face at the grocery counter. And politics is ugly as ever, and the economy is up and down and iffy and all of that. And I think it, like you, I look to escape it somewhat. I don't want to bury my head in the sand and say, well, I just don't listen to the news anymore. But I also am trying to balance it, looking for moments of joy in my life, because there are times when it just feels like too. Yeah.
And the politics thing. I've always been partisan, but an understanding partisan, meaning that I have a very definite way of thinking. I have very definite politics. I have very definite views on policy, but always open to an interesting other points of view. I listen to really bright people who come from the other end of the spectrum, even columnists. I have favorite columnists who are on the conservative side of the spectrum. But what's happening in what used to be the Republican Party is overwhelmingly sad. And that's a nice way.
It's a personality cult.
Yeah.
By the time you have a leader that says, I and I alone can fix it, and they're not a team player, that becomes a cult of personality that the RNC said they're not even going to bother with a platform. We're just going to do whatever Donald Trump wants.
Right.
That's not the Republican Party that I remember. And like you, I have that kind of bipartisan thing going on. There were lots of people in the Republican Party that I admired, or at the very least would listen to their point of view to balance out my own. That's not what's going on here. And the lack of civility, the lack of decency and dignity is very, very upsetting to me. I don't want to be a nation divided like that. I don't want to be divided by this. I think we're better than this.
I think I agree. Talking about current things that are going on, what do you think is going on currently?
Well, currently, I kind of searched for something currently to talk about today that wasn't in the realm of pandemic or politics, although this is a little pandemic-y. In Austin, music capital of the world, it looks like 2/3 of the venues that supply live music are going to permanently close their doors. And that's really sad to me. Music in this town is a $2 billion a year industry, and it really depends on live musicians, live music. And that's not happening right now. We've pretty much pulled the plug on that. Now, that being said, I had this weird thought this morning about drive-in movies. Drive-in movies were one of my favorite places when I was 17 years old because I liked to make out and also have the option of the movie. But I thought about, what about drive-in concerts where you had a band playing up on stage with a big screen behind them so they'd see what the band was doing, and people were in their cars with speakers or sitting on the roofs of their cars, but they were kept apart social distancing wise in the way that cars used to be kept apart in drive-ins. So I had this thought of, wouldn't that be a cool live music and a repurposing for any drive-ins that we have left, or maybe a rebuilding of drive-ins. It's also something that we could do about the movie industry. I'm not ready to go to a theater yet and sit in the dark 6 feet apart and go through all of that, but I would go to the drive-in. I might even take up making out again.
With the rock stars you used to admire. From the old days.
Well, I can just pretend my husband's a rock star now. He does play the bass, so.
That's right. Interesting, you said, I just read an article about my hometown, New York City, and how the comedy clubs were closing.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no place for the comedians to play. And that was a big part of our lives. There were so many comedy clubs, and gave birth to all the Jerry Seinfelds and all the great comedians. I think that's sad because, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were telling me how they go to sleep at night listening to comedy routines because...
that's funny. I often watch the comedians on Netflix.
Me too.
I was watching, I think her name is Kathleen Madigan, has a special on Netflix right now. Mm-hmm. And I love to go to sleep like that. It's kind of uplifting and buoyant, and you can laugh. Yeah. Laugh while you go to sleep.
Yeah. It's another way the arts, the pandemic is really taking its toll on the arts. I mean, we had talked about earlier, all the Broadway theaters are closed, and there's no way they're opening anytime soon. I mean,
Well, that's why I like the drive-in idea.
Right. Yeah.
I think drive-ins could solve a lot of problems. We could see opera, we could see the ballet, we could see rock and roll, we could see comedians. I mean, it's a little bit different, but why not?
I think drive-ins are a great idea. I guess economically they're difficult because a drive-in would hold 100 cars or 200 cars. Paying what as opposed to, 500 people coming to and sitting in an audience. The problem with Broadway, the Broadway theaters, are that they can't support themselves unless every seat is taken, including people in standing room only. So they can't open with any distancing in the near future.
Wow.
So, no, it's sad. It's sad. Music. I never got to listen to music in Austin. I was looking forward to when I come visit you, for you taking me out to the clubs there to listen to some good music.
Well, one of the things about the loss in Austin is that Austin still has a few old-fashioned honky-tonks. Mm-hmm. And the honky-tonks were dance halls. Mm-hmm. And so the Broken Spoke is a famous one. In fact, you can look up the Broken Spoke, and there is a documentary about it somewhere. But it's got that honky-tonk feel to it. And you don't go to the Broken Spoke to stand around and listen to music. You go to dance and listen to music. And everybody in country music who's anybody has played at the Broken Spoke. And it's just a funky dance hall, dive, wonderful place that, right now is shuttered. And I hate to see that ambiance go away with the shuttering of the club.
Yeah, it's sad. Again, possibly it'll all be reinvented, for the next generation and for us to enjoy till the end of our days. Okay, instead of taking a break, why don't we jump right into, I think it's 1977.
It is.
It is. You want to take it?
Well, I just have a few things. 1977, Jimmy Carter was sworn in as the 39th president of the United States. Roots was the big TV event of the year.
That's right, I forgot.
The big miniseries about the history of Black people being brought here and where they came from. Amazing, amazing series.
Relevant today, isn't it?
Very relevant today. Right. Hard to believe we haven't come very far. Elvis Presley died in 1977. I think he was 42 or 43. And something that I hope you will talk about, because I'm hoping you were in New York at the time, the great New York City blackout?
I can talk to that.
All right. I was 25 years old at the time, and I quit my job at the Midnight Special when I was 25 to go sing in a rock and roll band. And I want to tell you that that was the shortest career I ever had.
Wow.
And I'm not sorry I did it.
All right. Blackout. So it was interesting. It was the second blackout that I participated in. And it was 1977. I had just moved into a big, huge apartment complex, about 45 floors. I moved into the 33rd floor. It was an apartment complex that was dedicated only to artists. So you had to prove that your income was coming from the arts. And your rent in these brand new luxury apartments with terraces that overlooked all of New York was based on your income. So I had just moved into that. And just a couple of days later, I think I was coming back. I was coming back from California, and I came to the apartment building, and the blackout had started, and I lived on the 33rd floor. And back then, there were no emergency generators. I had luggage from the trip, and I had to walk up those 33 floors. And
how many suitcases did you carry?
There were two. Oh, no, I'm sorry. There was one wheeler and then a backpack. So, but I did it. And of course, I was 27 years old. So I had the strength and stamina to make it up there. Although I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to pass out, if I remember correctly. So that was the blackout. There was other events that happened, I think. Seattle Slew won the Triple Crown. The Panama Canal was given back to Panama. But the story, I was trying to think, how we pick a year, and I don't know really the story that goes behind the year until I really think about it. I go back, where was I living? What was I doing? I was a bartender at a theatrical restaurant. It was started by this former chorus man. He was older. It was called Backstage. His name was Ted Hook. And his big thing was after the theater, all the stars would come to have dinner about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. I was the bartender at that restaurant.
Fabulous.
And there were a couple of stories there, and I'll try to make them short. Although my segment is short at the end, so I think I can probably go on a little longer on this. There were a couple of things I remember. I remember when you're a bartender, everybody sits and talks to you. They want to talk to you. The bartender is always considered somebody special just because they're pouring the drinks. And I never understood it, by the way. You're elevated as if you were the most successful psychiatrist on the planet standing behind a bar. And people would sit there and tell you the stories, and, I'd make the drinks, and it was just phenomenal. But there are two things I remember, or three things actually. At about 12, 1 o'clock, everybody would start dancing. Everybody was drunk. Liza Minnelli was there. All the great stars were there. But I remember talking to a great, great star. And when she left the bar, after I talked to her to go back to her table, she yelled at me, she goes, "David, you're gonna be a star." And her name was Ethel Merman.
Oh my gosh.
The other story, the last story, was Richard Burton was on Broadway with Elizabeth Taylor. They had not been married. He was married to a woman called Susie Hunt. But Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. And Richard Burton was, to say the least, one of the heavier drinkers in the community. And he used to sit at the bar and just rant about the people all the other stars sitting in the restaurant. And he would just get very, very drunk. And one day, Susie Hunt came over to me and she said, "You need to take care of Richard. Make sure he gets in the car. I'll have a car waiting in the back, right? Please get him into the car." And I did through the rest of the run of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. So that was all 1977, and when we picked it, I had no idea what my story was going to be behind it. That's 77.
1977, there you have it.
Right. Again, we're not going to break. We're going to go straight through. And I've got I've been thinking segment. This is going to be short, I think. And I've touched on this before, but there was a sequence of events that made me think about it again. And I've been thinking about wisdom again as we get older, how wise we get. There's an expression, and I'm going to reverse it in a second, that youth is wasted on the young. It makes total sense. And people say the idea went back thousands of years. It just makes sense. You get older, you get more experience. And I think George Bernard Shaw did it a little differently. He said, youth is a wonderful thing. What a crime to waste it on the young. And but this is the one that'll catch you, and I'll tell you the story behind it. I think wisdom now is wasted on the old. And I'll tell you a set of events, and then we can talk about it. Wisdom to me has always been the collection of information. Because you have so much information at your fingertips that you've acquired over the years, you put things together. You have an understanding of things that you didn't when you were younger. It also helps you with the whole process of deduction. I can do things that are ridiculous because I can figure out things based on the information I have. We had a wedding I think I may have told you about it, about a month and a half ago. It was my friend Ann's son, and it just so happens I helped deliver him 34 years ago. And he was sitting around with his friends. We were social distancing, so there were only 12 people at the actual house, but all the computers were set up with Zoom. So all the friends they had in Europe, she comes from she was born in China, and so her family was out there. So everybody was on Zoom, but we were sitting around, but his childhood friends who he grew up with were there, about 3 or 4 of them, and he was sitting there. And, I made my way to give him a big hug, and I sat down with him and his friends. And we were carrying on a conversation, and I was trying to explain to them. They were talking about things and traveling, and I was talking about way back when, how things developed, what things were like. And they would all sort of look at each other in that little smirk. And I started a conversation with one of them, and their answer to me was, whatever. And I go, what do you mean, whatever? And they turned around to me and they said, well, look, boomers have a point of view, and we have an expression when we're talking to people like you. We say, okay, boomers. It's like a dismissal. So my question to you is, all that wisdom we acquired, aren't we supposed to be sharing it with our youth, teaching them instead of being dismissed? And if we're constantly being dismissed and we're not sharing that wisdom, then it really is wasted on us, isn't it?
I guess it depends on how we think we need to share our wisdom. And I just went through this on a guest podcast I did with someone. And I said, I used to think that being an elder, a wise elder, meant sharing, voicing my hard-won wisdom. What I found out was voicing my hard-won wisdom was rarely welcome to a younger generation. What I've discovered since is that the best way to share my hard-won wisdom as an elder is by modeling it, how I live my life, how it looks when I live my life. Now, an astute young person is either going to pick that up or they're not. But I'm not out there reading anybody's beads for them and telling them this is the way it used to be or this is what's better. It's more a matter of how do I model life. If you're around me, you'll find that I'm pretty much positive. I'm grateful. I try to be upbeat. I try to speak my heart, whether what's in my heart is shadowy and gray or enlightened and white. So that's my new hit, and it's fairly recent learning of my own, that the best way to share my elder wisdom is by demonstrating it. If somebody wants to pick up on it, great. If not, no skin off my nose.
All right, let's segue into tell me something good.
Oh, you know what? I have a wedding story about saying something good too. Sorry for rattling the papers around, but I searched for this today. So earlier this month, there was a couple in Ohio, and they were getting married, and they had their wedding planned out, and they prepaid the catering, and everything got canceled. Everything got shut down again. So they had the wedding in front of family and friends, and they decided to donate the catering to a shelter. It was called Laura's Home Women's Crisis Center in Cleveland, Ohio. So they donated this catered meal to this women's and children's shelter, and they showed up in their full bride and groom regalia and celebrated their wedding and their reception with these women and these kids. And I got to tell you, when I read this story, I took it upstairs and I read it to my husband, I cried. I thought that is such a beautiful, positive thing to do with what was really a bummer on their wedding, right? No reception. But they found a way to make it a party nonetheless. And all I can say is, I hope this marriage is the happiest, longest marriage ever. They absolutely inspired me. Sometimes the thing that heals us the most is to just give it away to someone else. So that's my something
and
good.
A wonderful way to end the show. All right.
Indeed.
All right, Steph. Say goodbye.
All right, David.
Goodbye, everybody. And thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.